Hey there, my name's John Lacossi. My company is Internet Marketing Experience. I'm here with Philip A. Nicolosi of Phil Nicolosi Law. I've been a full-time internet marketer and website developer for about 10 years now, and I've worked with a lot of business clients. And the reason that I'm partnering with Phil to do these videos is because the legal side of website design and internet marketing is one of the most neglected areas that there is in our business. And I'm sitting with an expert that knows everything there really is about this. So, Phil, that being said, you want to tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure, thanks, John. I'm an internet and transactional attorney by trade. I've been doing this, I've been focusing on e-commerce and internet-related law since about 2007. I've been practicing law since about 2003. In that time, I've had numerous clients that have had both brick and mortar and online operations, so I've got to know quite a bit about the intricacies of operating a business online and the legal pitfalls in which you need to be aware of to successfully avoid liability.
Right on. Well, that's what it's all about. So, Phil, this particular video, you and I wanted to talk about the golden rule of domain names.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of your tag. You kind of created that tag.
Yeah, that was a real brief blog article I put out about 4 or 5 years ago, and I thought to myself, really succinctly, that's a nice way of getting across the concern that you would have about operating your own website and having any kind of an online presence. I wanted to catch a kind of a unique way of getting that out to them, so I thought of the golden rule, which is basically a way of telling them very clearly to own your own domain.
Yeah.
Always hold on to your own domain and make sure that you're not letting a third party be the master of your domain, so to speak. So the golden rule is really just something I came up with as a title to a blog post to get across to people like you and my business owner clients how important it is to make sure you're controlling that at all times.
So, as a website developer, that is something I come across a lot. Let's say a business client wants to transition their website over to my company. Their old developer has it in some business account of theirs. And then that particular developer may be hard to get a hold of, not responsive, so on and so forth.
Exactly.
So by a web development company keeping the domain name in their own file attached to their business name is a severe liability, right?
I think it is to someone like you as a web developer and a marketer, and it is to the business, of course, itself. It's a liability to them, of course, because they don't have any control over it. And I think your example is spot on. I can't tell you how many times I get those calls from clients saying, "My gosh, I've got a new web developer, I've got a new designer. We're going a different route, and we're trying to renew the domain name, and it expired a month ago." And we still got time, according to my new developer. We haven't lost it yet, but he has no control over it. I have no control over it. I'm not the registrant. What do we do, Phil? And that's when I tell them, well, how did the process start? And they tell me how they had their developer from the beginning register the domain name in his or her name or the company name. So it becomes really difficult in those situations to try to obtain it back. It is possible, but technically a GoDaddy or the registrant, whoever that may be, doesn't consider you to be the owner. And I use the buzzword owner just for sake of ease, but I mean, we're talking about registrant of a domain name and a registrar. The registrar would be a GoDaddy or a Network Solutions or what have you. And then, of course, you, the owner, would be the registrant.
Right.
If you're not listed as a registrant on the records of the registrar, then it's going to be awfully difficult for you to convince them they should release the domain to you or give you any information related to the domain, etc. So the easiest thing is to always make sure from the beginning that your company, is always listed as a registrant of a domain name, and that you're, for lack of a better word, the owner of that domain name. It is a digital asset, and just like any other asset, you've got to control it and own it. You have title to your house because you have a deed. It's real estate. You've got title to a vehicle, a snowmobile, recreational vehicle. They're all assets, right? You have title to those things. A domain is no different. It's just a digital asset, and the way you acquire ownership and stake your claim to it is just to make sure that you're listed as a registrant. You're paying the fees, you're renewing it every year. And that's really, John, what the golden rule is all about. It's just making sure that you very simply understand that it can cause and create a lot of problems if you don't own it.
Let's do a hypothetical.
Yeah.
All right, which is a hypothetical that I've actually seen. Okay. Let's say a business owner that's watching this video lets a website developer register a domain name in their own business account, and then God forbid something actually happens to that website developer, and they can't be, I mean, let's say they're deceased.
Yeah,
Okay?
God forbid, sure.
And now they've got the website domain name for this particular business in their account, and they're deceased. They may or may not be paying the renewal. The family may not be taking over it. What actually happens to that domain name? What would a business owner have to do? What kind of hoops would they have to jump through to get their domain name back, if they could even do that?
Well, that's a problem. Is you'd have to convince. Let's just say it's GoDaddy, just for an example of who you might be dealing with. You'd have to pick up the phone and call GoDaddy and try to plead your case that you're the actual owner. And the problem is what they're going to do is they're going to ask you for credit card information. And if your credit card wasn't the credit card that was used to purchase a domain name, you've got a big hurdle to clear. And it's not going to necessarily be a slam dunk or even easy or even a guarantee that eventually you would get that domain name back from GoDaddy, because again, they've got their own set of rules they have to follow. They've got their own liability, and what they don't want is to have anybody calling them up out of the blue and saying, well, please transfer this domain name from one account to another just because we say that it's ours. As you can imagine, there's going to be an extra layer of hurdles you're going to have to go through to reacquire that. Even though it's innocuous, and certainly the web developer wouldn't have done it on purpose, things happen. And in that scenario, you're talking about quite a bit of a hassle to try to convince the registrant to release a domain name to you, your company.
So it's a major problem.
Well, it can be. I've seen them not be released. I've seen them take a couple months to investigate.
Yeah.
And then there's some scenarios where there's enough information presented where it might have taken a week and they ended up getting it done. But the point is, why would you want to go through that and take that chance that you could literally be delayed and being able to transfer your domain, control your domain, doing things that you may need to do, point your domain in a different server.
Yeah.
As you know, there's all different functions that you may need to do with your domain, because the domain is like the oil in your car.
Yeah.
When the oil in your car goes bad, it gets old, you've got to change it, or you can have engine problems. I mean, a domain, that's the lifeblood of your online presence, and if you don't take care of it, for lack of a better term, if you don't maintenance that domain by renewing it and things like that, then you're going to have big problems down the road.
So let's go back to our example. The person calls up GoDaddy. The person that registered the domain name is no longer accessible. Let's say that doesn't go the right way. GoDaddy says, sorry, there's nothing we can do. It stays in their account. As an attorney who specializes in internet law, what additional power would you have in that situation, if any?
Well,
I mean,
the problem is at that point you're spending money to bring a person like me on board, and I have to make my case to the registrant as to why this domain name should be transferred over to the account of my client. You say what power, if any, and if any is a good question, because there might not be any. Now, I've been successful. I've not had a situation where at least I've not been able to, at least somehow, some way, eventually, convince the registrant that this is the proper owner of the domain name based on the criteria that they have established in their own policy, and then we're able to give them documentation, evidence, what have you. A lot of times, we could show credit card payments to the old web developer. We could hopefully show a paper trail, that kind of a thing. But the point of all this and getting into this is, you see what you have to get into just to reacquire it. Then you're going to pick up the phone and call someone like me and say, what's the law say?
Right.
What are my rights? You've lost at that point. I mean, when it's a situation of, I could have just taken the simple step of making sure that my company owns a domain name, we're listed on the records of the domain, on the HIPAA records. It clearly shows that we're the technical and administrative contacts. We are the registrant of the domain. That's a very simple step. And you've lost if you haven't taken that step, and you've got to call someone like me 3 years later. So it's not necessarily a matter of the ship sailed and you're sunk completely. I wouldn't say that. I would just say you're going to be spending money that you would never have normally needed to spend if you wouldn't have taken a very simple preventative measure from day one, the minute that domain was thought up in your mind, and you have to go tell somebody, whoever it was, hey, go register this for me.
And it's very inexpensive on top of that. It's like, what, $15, $20 a year registered domain name, maybe a little bit more depending on what company you're using.
Absolutely, and
So-
that's a great point, because the whole mantra of the golden rule of the domain name ownership is really about ease and simplicity, and that's really it. Is people just don't know what they don't know.
Right.
So the purpose here of this video is to say this is very simple, everyone. You just create an account, whether it be GoDaddy, Network Solutions, your favorite registrar, excuse me. You create an account with the domain name providers, and it's really that simple.
Yeah.
You give them your credit card information, and then you make sure that you're listed, your company or yourself, if you're a sole proprietor, has the owner, the registrar. I keep confusing those terms, registrant. GoDaddy is a registrar, as a provider. You as the company or the owner would be the registrant. You just want to make sure you're listed. And if you do that, you're going to avoid all sorts of problems. They're going to give you email reminders every year when you have to renew. You're going to be in the loop because you're going to list that information. And that's the other thing, is what happens if you have the same developer that is listed as a registrant and owns the domain name on paper, but that person just simply fails to renew it because they get overwhelmed, they don't have it on their tickler system, they just miss it. And all of a sudden, emails go ignored by them for whatever reason, and then you've lost the domain name. The grace period is over. I'm not sure off the top of my head what that would be, maybe 3 months, I believe. But the grace period runs, and then all of a sudden the domain name is back for someone else to pick up, and the general public, has now picked that domain name back up, and you've really got a problem.
Right.
So all that can be avoided of simple knowledge, John. Just understanding what to do from the onset, and that's really the point of this.
So, Phil, let's say that a business owner that's watching this right now goes ahead and they follow the golden rule. They register their own domain name, and then, of course, they may hire a website developer to do their website, but they own the domain name, like we just explained. They're not necessarily in the clear yet because they actually have to proactively manage their domain name now.
Right.
And so you don't just set it up once and then forget about it for 5 years, right? If you register the domain name for a single year, and that domain is going to renew, after say 10 or 11 months, it's going to ask for the renewal.
Yes.
And then if the credit card on file is expired, it won't renew, at
Right.
which point the website could go down and cause a lot of problems. I've seen it as a website developer where a credit card will expire, the website will go down, and to the point where the domain is actually released and the company loses the domain name.
Yeah.
At which point, then anybody can pick it up.
Right.
Like a domain name company could buy it and then try to sell it back to you for $5,000, which we've seen that before. From my perspective as a website developer, I always recommend to small business clients to log into their GoDaddy or wherever their domain registrar is. Log in on like a quarterly basis just to make sure everything's good to go, make sure the account's not hacked, make sure the credit card on file is still valid. Are there any other tips that they should keep in mind, Phil, when they're doing that?
Yeah, the one that comes to mind, John, most simply is check your spam.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I myself have gotten an email from a HostGator or a GoDaddy, and I check my junk folder, of course. But sometimes it goes there, and you're busy. You don't have your own calendaring system. Sometimes you rely on those emails, and they come. Those annual emails will come and remind you. And if you miss it because you're not continually checking your spam folder, I think that's just common sense for any business owner. Always constantly check your spam folder because very important emails could get stuck there. And I see that as a very common mistake quite a bit. And I say, well, didn't you check, didn't you get an email? And they say, well, no. I said, well, are you sure? And then it comes to my attention about a month later, the client will call me and say, gosh, I didn't even think about my spam folder. And I did go back and I checked. I didn't delete anything, and it's there.
Yeah.
So check your spam folder. Make sure you're constantly, but just, if you're watching this video, you now understand how important it is. And hopefully you're going to say to yourself, well, I'll just put it on my own, my own personal calendar, my own business calendar.
Right.
You can have your own tickler system. So that's really the point, is don't rely, I guess, on others. Rely on yourself, and don't rely on those emails even, and make sure you have your own system to calendar it.
Phil, thanks so much for sharing the golden rule of domain names, and really appreciate your expertise.
Thanks, John. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. And for more helpful tips, if you're an online business owner and you've got a presence online, if you'd like some more helpful information and tips, please tune into our channel for more periodic episodes that we'll be broadcasting.
Absolutely. We'll see you on the next program.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks.